almost done. We are on block 12 for my 12 block sampler quilt. Are you guys ready to dive in? Hey friends, my name is Becca and welcome back to my sewing room. In today's video, we are going to construct the final block for our 12 block sampler quilt that we put together because we are all stuck indoors because of COVID-19. The final block I picked simply because of its name, and I gotta tell you, it seems appropriate. It is called the New Album Block, and you can find this as pattern number 60 in our book. For those of you that don't know, we are using this book. It is called the Quick and Easy Block Tool. I do have a few of these books at the time of this recording that are left in my Etsy shop, so if you want to pick one up, give that link in the description box a try, and you might be able to get a copy of this for yourself. This book, while it does have the patterns for all 12 of the blocks that we're doing this sampler quilt, plus many more, you don't need it to do this sew along because I'm going to take you through step by step making the blocks in each video. So let's take a look down here at our book and we're going to dive into doing the new album block. The new album block actually I picked because I think once the states start opening back up, we're going to find that the world is never going to go back to normal as we knew it. I think we have a new normal, and so it just seemed fitting to close out our COVID sampler quilt with a block called New Album. So here is our pattern. You can see this is actually pretty easy. We're going to have in the center what they call a square and a square. So we'll cut a square piece of fabric and put some triangles around it. And then we're just going to put a little border and sashing around the outside. Simple, simple, simple. You can't get much simpler than that. So honestly for this, we only need 2 prints. You can put 3 or 4 in here if you want to, but for me, I'm only going to use 2. Let's take a look at our cutting requirements. Where I see yellow in here, I'm going to use background. So I'll have background here and I'll have background for these little triangles. And then where this turquoise is, I'll pick one of the batiks that's left over from that 9 batik fat quarter bundle. Did I say that right? Yeah. I'll pick one of those that I want to kind of showcase. And that's it. Simple, simple, simple. Because I don't necessarily trust the cutting instructions in this book, I want to cut bigger and then size down. Let me toss up on the screen for you the cutting instructions that I would have you use. So for your background fabric, you're going to need to cut 4 squares measuring at 3.5 inches. You're going to need to cut 2 squares measuring at 4 1/8 of an inch. And then you'll want to cut that on the diagonal once so that you end up with 4 triangles. And then for the print that you want to showcase, you're going to cut 4 rectangles that measure at 3.5 inches by 6.5 inches, and then 1 square that measures at 4 3/4 of an inch. That's it. It's pretty easy to cut. So let's get my cutting mat, my rotary cutter, and my fabric. Poof. We're ready to go. 4 3.5 inch squares. Let's double it up.
Are you recording?
Well, not anymore, I'm not.
Oh, I was calling you back to see what you needed.
Yeah, my Mac wasn't cooperating. I got it to work.
Does Jason have Rona?
I don't know yet.
Do you have Rona?
No, not that I'm aware of.
You don't know yet is the answer.
Well, I didn't get tested for it is the answer.
You were there.
I got tested to see if I had it before.
I think a lot of people did.
I use my phone to record what's kind of going on down here. And while I was in the middle of cutting my fabric, I got a phone call. So that footage is gone forever because I continued cutting while I had my phone call. All right, so now that I have all of my pieces cut, it's time to arrange our pieces into our block. And it's actually going to be pretty easy. Let's take a look. I've basically got 4 cuts of fabric. I have some rectangles of my print, I have a square of my print, and then for my background, I have my triangles and I have some squares. We're going to work on the center of the block first, and we're going to take the square that's going to go in the center of our block, plus our background triangles, and we're going to put these together into a block that's known as a square in a square. Let's take a look at how we do this. We're going to take our square and lay it out, and then we're going to take each of these triangles, and we're going to surround that square with the triangles so that the long edge of that triangle is touching one of the four sides of the square. Now, the important thing here is that we need to make sure that we're finding the center for these blocks. So what I'm going to do is take my square and I'm going to fold it in half 2 ways. And I'm just going to kind of gently finger press this so that I have a little bit of a crease. And that's basically going to mark the middle of each of the 4 sides of my block. Next, I'm going to take each of my 4 triangles and I'm going to fold them in half, touching these little corners to each other. And that's going to give me a little crease that's directly in the middle of that long edge of my triangle. Now it's just a matter of sewing this together. So what I find works best for this is when I sew the sides and then the top and the bottom, because I need to be able to sew these on and then press it open and then sew the other sides on. So we're going to take these together. We're going to match up those creases that we just made. That's going to guarantee that we're putting the center on top of the center, and we're going to sew that at 1/4 of an inch, and then we're going to turn it around 180 degrees and do the same thing on the opposite end. Now that this is sewn, I'm just going to open it up and I'm going to let the fabric press to the triangles. It's going to naturally probably want to go that way anyway. And I'm going to do the same thing on these 2 sides, the top and the bottom, the same exact thing that I did. Line up the centers and sew at 1/4 of an inch. Okay, and then for these last 2 seams, we're just going to press those open as well. And now we've got a block that looks something like this. I'm going to take this over to my iron and press a dry hot iron on top of this to make all those seams lay nice and flat, because we're going to need to trim this down. Okay, this block needs to be trimmed. Okay, so I know this block needs to be trimmed down to 6.5 inches. And while I could definitely trim it up by just measuring 1/4 inch from all the corners and lobbing it off, if I do that, I might not still have a perfect 6.5 inch square. So what I'm going to do instead is lay my square ruler on top of the block. I'm going to make sure that the 45-degree line is going parallel to the 2 seams on either side of it. And then I'm just going to kind of play around with the ruler a little bit to make sure that I have fabric extending past the sides of the ruler and then the 6.5 inch marks of the ruler. And I want to look at all 4 of my points from this block and make sure that it looks like there's about 1/4 of an inch for me to sew into the rest of the block. That looks pretty good. That's the hardest part of this block. We're almost done. Let's lay this out and I'll show you how we're going to finish putting this block together. This is the center. So what we're going to do is take our 4 background squares and we're going to put this in the 4 corners of this block. Just like this. And then we're going to take these 4 rectangles that we have and we're going to lay them in these spaces just like this. And that's it. This is pretty simple. Now all we got to do is sew this together like an eye patch, just like we've done with all of the other ones. We're going to lay all of this right sides together. And then I'm going to pick up from top down. And then over here, I'm going to pick up from top down. Just so that I have all of my fabrics nice and tidy and in a row, in a package. I'm going to take these to the machine and sew them. When I work with this one, I want to make sure that I'm laying my print rectangle down on the bottom, and I have my square and a square piece on the top. That's going to allow me to be able to visually see the intersection where that point is, and I can be very careful about sewing exactly through that point instead of past the point. Because I chain stitched them, they're all together, so all I really have to do is just kind of finger press them. I'm going to finger press the top row so that the seams are going in towards the middle. The center row, the seams are going out away from that diamond, and then the bottom row, the seams are going in towards the center. So basically, you're going to press towards your print fabric. And then we're just going to add on the final third piece for each of these rows, and then we'll sew all three of the rows together and we're done. Remember to follow your pressing to press it towards the print. And then we're going to sew all three rows together. So here is the top row. When you do this, these seams should nest pretty nicely. If you want to take a second to press those seams in that direction, that would make it a little bit easier to make these nest. But because there's not really a lot of bulk, I feel like I can just finger press them and I'll be okay. Now, don't do what I'm doing. When you sew this together, try and assemble it so that you see the back side of the diamond square. That's going to let you visually be able to follow where the point of your diamond is. I started sewing from the wrong side, so I'm just going to have to wing it. That's it. This is our block. Now it's just time to press it. So this is it, our final block. This is called the new album, which I think is appropriate given the times that we're dealing with. As the states are starting to open up, we're going to see our new normal, and we're going to end our sew-along quilt with a block that symbolizes we're entering a new era. The next steps from here are just to take all 12 of those blocks and sew them together with some sashing and maybe some cornerstones, toss some borders on, and then you can quilt it. But don't worry, I'm not going to leave you hanging because that is the next video that I have in the series. I'm going to take all 12 of my blocks, put them together with some borders, some cornerstones, and some sashing, and then I'm going to take it over to my mid-arm and get it quilted. I hope you're sewing along with me. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you thought of this block, and I would love to see what your blocks look like. You can post pictures of them to the Becca's Babes group over on Facebook or share it on social media with the hashtag Sew Becca Sampler. That's all I've got for this video, guys. Thank you for doing all 12 of these blocks with me, and don't forget to subscribe and stick around because I'm going to show you how to put all 12 of these together.